So here's a landscape. This water was a dry stream bed with a very little trickle. So this person went in and they built a rock wall, just like a beaver would build a dam, and they built their little walk wall and they back flooded that property. So now they have a pond. They didn't stop any water, so now that property's value would increase. Would you pay more for a property that had water? I mean, do you like the pond? Do you think the pond's expensive? No. $1 per cubic meter, okay? Does anybody like the red pots? They're nice. One red pot holds 2,000 liters. I can buy one pot delivered right there, $20 US. Good price? Fair? Yeah? So, but how much, 2,000 liters divided by $20 is how much per 1,000 liters? $10. But if I dig the pond, it only costs me $1 for 1,000 liters. Or the pond is 10 times cheaper than the pot. So this gives us the thing where we can see how we can store water in landscape. And you know what the beautiful thing about the pond is? If I pay $1 for 1 cubic meter, but I sell the property, you know how much I make? 4 times that. So water features on property, real estate, don't talk about permaculture, just real estate. The value or the cost to make the water feature typically can sell for a factor of 4. So not only do I have an increased property value, I have the access to the water for my garden, and I can go swimming, really nice, beautification thing. So these are reasonings that we might want to look at a property. So from a permaculture perspective, when I look at a property, I might want to see where I can hold water. And if this property could hold water, it would be more valuable to me than this property, right? I had the advantage here in Thailand because when I went around looking for properties with my wife, I had a laptop and I had Google Earth. So when I looked at a property, I looked at the watershed. I wanted to know how much water would come to that property. So I only had to buy this property, it's not too big, right? But it has the key point in the landscape, right? Right there, that has an access that harvests 300 acres of water. So now all that water comes through that key point, and now I built a dam. See the road? I now control the watershed. And at that point, the irrigation that we have for our rice fields, we have a nice rice farm, we're able to maintain the irrigation perfectly because we control the watershed. And I didn't have to pay for the watershed, I just had to pay for the property that controlled the key point, because as a permaculturalist, I was able to read the landscape, I was able to understand key points from earthworks, and I understood the value of water and what water could do to change this property. So the property was degraded, it had no soils, it has no trees, but I was able to turn it in only now 6 years into what might look like a little jungle because of the water capture. And this is very important that we need to look at that. So that gives us this concept that water is really the most critical mineral on the planet. There's plenty of water in the world if we define the ways in which we can store and use it. So Bill's focus in the book is to ask you this question: how can you store and use water? And if you can answer that question, you can create yield. And if you have yield, surplus yield, then you can share it with other people. But if you don't create surplus yield, then you are a consumer. See, I'm a producer, guys. I make food that I share with the world. Last year, we made over 400,000 kilograms of food here at Raktamachat. We produce. There's only 2 levels, right? You're a consumer or a producer. Which one are you, right? So the question is, if you want to be a producer, you want to do that, how can you store water? And if you store it, how can you use it? Well, one good way, I told you the best way was to store water in your soil. So if my soils, when I purchase this property, are degraded and compacted because people use tractors on it for like 20 years, right? Well, if I can come to the property and I decompact it, so I pull a plow to decompact it, a yeoman plow, a key line, then I'm able to let air and water go in, and then my soils will rebuild. So when I put my bio-teas, I put my bio-ferts, I add back my worms, I put in the organic matters, right? And I decompact the soils. Now my soils hold lots of water, right? So that's a really easy technique, very inexpensive, and a great technique. So there's yeoman soil, 3 times a year, 9 inches of topsoil, and then you put in different species. So remember, the soil controls the type of vegetation. So when it's compacted, it grows weeds. I have to go through the weed regime to get to my first level and my second level. And what we like to eat, our foods, vegetables as we know them, are second successional level grasses, and they need decompacted, flocculated soils. So now that we can use this technique, now our soils, if I go to plant something, guess what? It grows easy, right? It's easy. Just stick you saw the lemongrass? No problem. Put a hole, boom, easy, done. Our swales, or infiltrating water systems, allow us to get the water into the landscape, right? So if I can slow it down, I get time to let it soak into my soils, not run off my property. So we can see this. This is a large water. These are swales. Sometimes people ask, hey, if you have swales, you have to plant trees? No. Swales can have trees for windbreaks or for food production, like a mini food forest, and or they don't have trees. So here are swales slowing the water flow, but in a cattle situation. But here's a swale in someone's yard. So sometimes people say, oh yeah, but swales are ugly. I don't know. I think they look kind of natural if you put plants. But this person made a swale, and they put a nice little rock, planters. So when it rains, it looks nice. And when the water sinks in, they just have stones, like the river stones, right? Looks nice, right? So you can, as a landscape architect, also design in really nice features that will still harvest the water. It doesn't have to be ugly. So these are giving us options of what we can do. Really beautiful project here. I don't say many times people's names and or organizations, but Stephen Kren is a great permaculturalist that works in depressed places. Permacultureglobal.org is his organization if you'd like to check it out. And these are micro swales. And we utilize micro swales here also at Raktamachat. I kind of learned that from seeing this. And so he goes to places, villages, and he shows them how to terraform or their landscape for food production. So here he's showing, or he's teaching a course to locals. Look how easy it is with some running water to make my swales. So when we do our swale day, I'll teach you how to make swales. It's really easy and empowering. So they're sitting here and he's showing them how to make water flow on contour. And then they're terracing this hillside, right? So we start to see the terraces forming, utilizing this water storage technique. He gets the locals, they're empowered, they can make what's known as a keyhole garden bed. Okay, so a keyhole garden bed's really cool. Makes like a key, and I have a little circular garden bed. And there we see that when it rains, the water is held on the landscape and goes into the keyholes, and then the raised beds grow food. And I walk in the swale, so the path for my garden is the swale. Very interesting technique. And in that instance, I don't lose any space, right? Because my swale is my path, and my garden beds are raised, and it also makes a beautiful garden. Also think about this, we can still utilize here, if we have captured other water in landscape, we could still then put in drip irrigation for times that it's not raining. So remember the swale captured the water to the tanks? Easily would have pressure to run drip irrigation. So when it rains, I hold the water in and soak it in. And when it doesn't, I've captured the water and I can use drip irrigation. Just two little techniques, maybe $100 of money, changes these people's lives. They now can grow fresh vegetables almost year-round, right? Where before, they really weren't able to grow fresh vegetables because they didn't have access to water. Can you imagine if all your vegetables, you had to carry the water? How difficult that would be? So a lot of times when we see places like this, what's happening is they don't have the technology to control the water, and when you give them that, their lives change.